Hello there, this is Mark Miles, and I just want to welcome you along to this webinar today. The purpose of this webinar is to give you an understanding and the key fundamentals to be able to understand and complete the TAE LLN 411 Address Adult Language Literacy and Numeracy Workbook that is part of your TAE program. As part of your program, you'll have 10 units to complete. However, many people find that they complete the TAE LLN 411 unit prior to coming to class. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to run you through some of the questions and help you understand how best to complete the workbook. Now, language literacy and numeracy is certainly a fundamental skill for all of our students to have. But the challenge that we often face is that the levels of learning, reading, writing, oral communication, numeracy are certainly declining in Australia, and we are no longer able to walk into a training room and expect our students to be able to read, write, and do numbers, as well as potentially the course may require, or as well as maybe we can ourselves as trainers. So it's very important that we do have a grasp on language literacy and numeracy for our students and how to help them through it if there are any challenges present. Okay, so this is the booklet, and as you can see on page 1, make sure that you put in your learner name, your email address, training venue, wherever you are undertaking your TA, whether that's Brisbane, Gold Coast, Melbourne, wherever you may be signed up to do that. If you're doing it via distance, then just type in distance. Okay. Date of course commenced, ideally put in the date that you enrolled in the course. Okay, so language literacy and numeracy, getting straight into it. It starts off with some short answer questions, and before we get into any of the questions, I just wanted to share with you a very important chart that's really going to help you out as you go through this booklet. But essentially, language literacy and numeracy is broken down into 5 core skills. And we can see that these core skills are learning, reading, writing, oral communication, and numeracy. And they go from levels 1 to 5. And we can see that level 1 is the basic or fundamental level. And it's pretty much what I call survival level. If we come up to level 5, it is highly technical and it is highly specialized. Okay, so key thing to remember is that just because you're a native speaker, it doesn't mean that you're a 5 for all core skills. And certainly, just because you're working in a highly technical role and could be able to perform the functions of, say, numeracy in a particular area, it doesn't mean you necessarily have the very high core skills of oral communication or writing necessarily. So this is a matrix, and you will, as you look through this, be able to pinpoint yourself and certainly other people, and it's a great tool to be able to break core skills down, and it no longer becomes a good LLN, bad LLN student. It's a case of finding where are they on this chart and how can we support them as best way possible. So naturally, numeracy is your ability to work with numbers and to solve equations and deal with problems that come up in a day-to-day fashion. Oral communication is one's ability to listen and also to communicate a message orally. Writing is your ability to get words on the page and convey a particular meaning. Reading is your ability to not just pronounce the words, not just know the meaning of the words, but to also understand the deeper meanings that may be put across from those words. Learning is your ability to manage your time and resources to get a learning outcome, and how quickly can you achieve a learning goal. Also, it can relate to how much support one may require when they're going through learning activities. Okay, so just to recap, we've got learning, reading, writing, oral communication, and numeracy, and they go from level 1 all the way up to level 5. Okay, now this comes straight out of a book called the Australian Core Skills Framework. This originated back in about 2011 when they realised that Australia really did have some significant challenges and issues with LLN, And they wanted to come up with a way to be able to best tailor training in the vet sector for people that were LLN challenged. And they wanted also a way to be able to pinpoint where a particular person's skill may lie across the board with their LLM. Okay, so let's jump into the questions. Now, if you take a look, question 1 is asking you, according to the ACSF, what are the 5 LLN skills? Okay, so I'll just show you the chart one more time, and you can probably write those in. Hint, 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 hint. Okay, so I'm sure by now in your booklet you've written in the 5 core LLM skills. Okay. Practical activity 2 is asking you to look at these bar charts. Now we have a spiky profile for Mary Louise, and a spiky profile basically just plots what a student's level might be for each of the core skills. So if we take a look at Mary Louise here, we can see that for learning, she's got level 4. For reading, she's a 2. For writing, she's a 2. And for oral communication, 5. She's doing very well in that area. And then numeracy, 2. Now, if we compare what she is to what the unit that she's studying requires, we may be able to find some gaps or discrepancies. So if we take a look at learning, she's a 4. What does the unit itself require? It requires a 4. So we can see that there's no gap there. However, we may find that there's other areas where she may be a bit deficient and she could be requiring some extra support. Okay, so without giving you what the answer might be, let's pose the question: if Mary Louise wanted to work in this field, what LLN core skills would require support? Okay, so we can see that there's some gaps there, and what you need to do is in this space here, just write in what the core skills would be that would require extra support. Would it be learning, reading, writing, oral communication, or numeracy? Okay. Next one, where might you look for expert help in providing the support for her? And what's one different resource or place for each LLN skill gap identified? So if hypothetically her learning was deficient, or her reading was deficient, or her writing was deficient, what is one way that we could support her, and where could we go to look for expert help in doing that? And you may be able to Google LLN support materials, you may be able to Google LLN support specialists, or even any government programs that come to mind. You may be able to put those in as your answers. Okay. So if we come down, practical activity 3. In the box next to the core LLN skills for each role, we have accountant, office manager, and your current role. Please enter the level of skill that you think is required for each LLN skill, from 1 being the lowest to 5 being the highest or the most important. So here, if we think about an accountant, probably you'd all agree that numeracy will probably be the most important for an accountant. So I'm probably going to put a 5 in there. Okay. Now an accountant, probably the least important, possibly would be communication. So in whatever order you think would be appropriate, go ahead and you're going to put in the most important, which is 5, next most important, which is 4, next is 3, next is 2, and next is 1. Okay. And office manager, you'll do exactly the same. And probably with an office manager, I'm going to give you a hint and probably say that this could be the most important. Okay. And next, we're asking for your own role. In your own role, what do you think would be the most important core skill for you to be most proficient at? And that's going to definitely vary depending on what role you're in. Okay. Next, explain why people in different roles may have different LLN skills and capabilities yet still be able to perform well within their role. And essentially, as we've already talked about, no one really has level 5 across all core skills. But probably what you're going to find is that when somebody is working in a role, They have developed certain strategies or certain ways to get around things, or they've got certain innate capabilities that really help them excel. So this question's asking you, explain why people in different roles may have different varied skills, yet they are extremely well able to survive and thrive within their role. So have a think about why that might be, and maybe draw upon your own experience when you may have struggled in one of the 5 core skills, but you've certainly been able to overcome that. Okay. Next, practical activity 4. The table below refers to the unit of competency. Highlight 10 trigger words from within the text. Okay. So just to give you some background, one of the things that you need to do when you're dealing with LLN in vocational education is that you need to be able to not just understand what level the student might be, but you need to be able to identify what level the course may require. So you may find that a student is at a level 3 for, say, reading, but you need to be able to understand what level your course may actually require them to be at. So one of the activities that you'll need to do as a vet practitioner is be able to look at a unit of competency, such as the one that we have in front of us, and be able to get a sense of what kind of levels of learning, reading, writing, oral communication, numeracy would this particular unit require. So if we take a look at this table, and this unit is related to organizing meetings. Okay, so if we take a look at this table, and let's take a look at 1.5, advise participants of meeting details. Okay, so I'm just going to do one quick example for you. Advise participants of meeting details. Now, advise participants, that could be, would it be a learning word, a reading word, a writing word, an oral communication word, or a numeracy word? Now, probably advise participants is probably going to be either a writing word or an oral communication word. So what you're going to do is you're going to write the word advise participants in either the writing box or the oral communication box. Whichever you pick is totally up to you, and yes, they can go into more than one box. But we're looking for you to highlight 10 of the trigger words. And let's pick another example. Let's pick check documentation. So check documentation is probably going to be, yes, you've guessed it, probably a reading word. So in here, we're going to write check documentation. Okay, so up here, we're going to underline 10 of the words, and we're going to put them in the appropriate boxes. Okay. Next, based on the information above, what level would be required as a minimum in each of the core skills to undertake this unit? So if we've come up with oral communication has some particular words in here, up here, and you may think that based on the difficulty level of the words that are found, you may decide that for organizing a meeting, somebody may require a level 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 for oral communication for organizing a meeting. Organizing a meeting probably doesn't require that much oral communication, and probably you could position it around a 2 or a 3. Okay, and at all times we're just relating it back to this chart here. Okay, so this chart really shows that level 1, very, very basic. Level 2 gets a little bit more complicated. 3, average. 4, it's a little bit harder. And 5 is expert level. Okay, so just have a think about that when you're answering this. And just think about organizing a meeting. What kind of level of numeracy would be required? 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Use your best judgment. Okay. Now, if we come down a little bit further, practical activity 5. List 3 methods that could be used to determine a learner's LLN skills. Now, these could be things like pre and post testing. They could be things like that could be things like informal observation. That could be things like LLN test online or various other methods. But just have a think about how would you evaluate a learner's current LLN skills, and make sure that you put your answer into a sentence. Okay. Suggest methods and identify related sources of support for those with identified issues. Okay, so one method, for example, could be online tutorials. The source for that could be ESL websites or various other websites that may help LLN challenge students. Okay. Another method could be direct mentoring in the workplace. The source for that could be the workplace or the HR department. Okay, so just have a think about another method that could be used to support a student and whereabouts and how you would source that. So practical activity 6A. Romeo arrived from Italy 6 months ago, has applied for a job in a retail outlet. The role for which he has applied involves speaking with customers, processing telephone orders, doing the banking, giving correct change. As part of the interview, has been requested to complete the self-assessment checklist appearing below. Romeo will be required to perform all of these tasks if he wins the role for which he has applied. Okay. Read and analyze Romeo's responses to determine if there are any gaps in his core skills from self-assessment below. Now, if we take a look, he seems to be fine with using a calculator. However, adding up the prices of things in his head, that's a bit of a challenge. Working out how much change he should give, that's a bit of a challenge. So already we could see that his numeracy might need a bit of work. Okay, and if we come down a bit further, we can see that other things may need a little bit of support as well. So underneath that chart, we've got these boxes here. If there are gaps, tick the boxes next to the core skills requiring support. Okay, so already as we come up here, we can see that numeracy probably needs some support. So we're going to head and tick that box. Okay, now there's a number of other items up here that do need support. So have a look through and tick the appropriate boxes. Okay. Next, Romeo obviously requires some help to improve his performance in specific LLN core skills. Which of the LLN assistants listed below? Tick the boxes of those which would be most appropriate for aiding Romeo and his employers to increase his capabilities in these areas. So we've got specialist in-house support services, specialist consultants, team teaching approaches, mentoring, government and community support services. So you're free to tick any of those, and then it asks you, select one of the suggested core LLN specialist support services listed above and describe the evidence you would gather to confirm the fact that this type of LLN assistance would help Romeo. Okay, so essentially it's asking, if you were going to choose specialist consultants, how would you choose those specialist consultants? And how would you know that specialist consultants was a better method than, say, mentoring or government community support services? If you chose those, why did you choose that? And how would you know that choosing that would be the better option than the other ones? Okay, so it's just asking you to evaluate your decision as best as possible. Okay, so pop your answer in there with a couple of sentences. Next, practical activity 6. The following is an extract of a procedure for balancing a cash register. taken from Romeo's employer. It is a learning resource from their training package for new employees. Okay, so it details there the procedures that Romeo needs to follow. However, as we know, Romeo struggles quite a bit. And next question is asking you, list a minimum of 4 ways that you will customize this resource for Romeo, such that his LLN needs are met. Okay, so how would you change the instructions up here to be more digestible and understandable for him, considering he can't read very well and he has challenges with oral communication as well? Okay, so if we think about that, that could be things like making things into pictures. It could be breaking the instructions down even further. It could be making it into videos. It could be a number of different things. And this question is asking you to list 4 ways. Okay. Then the question is asking you, how would you use this tool to assist Romeo in his duties? Okay, so would you get him to read it every day? Would you get him to explain it back to you? Would you explain it to him? Would you put it up next to the cash register? How would you use the resource to best support him? Practical activities 7. Ijun is an ESL, English as a Second Language worker from South Korea. He is an excellent worker with sound grasp of the English language, but struggles in making himself understood. As a matter of fact, he has even been reported being laughed at by native English co-workers for demonstrating non-native-like pronunciation. And review the strategies above, then select and justify a support strategy that might assist Ijun in overcoming this barrier. Okay, so we've got a list of strategies here, such as using authentic language in the workplace, placing the learning in workplace and other adult contexts relevant to the lives of the learners. Questions asking you to read through the strategies and pick out the one that you think will be best to support Ijun. There is no right or wrong answer at all. Whatever you pick is totally fine. Okay. But we just need to think about, considering he's from South Korea, considering that we really want to make it as relevant to the workplace as we can, just factor that into your decision and pop in your answer. Next, in your group, discuss your ideas for supporting Ijun and gather feedback from your peers. Make notes of this feedback in the space below. All right, so this is essentially asking you to ask other people around you to read through exactly the same material and then come up with the best idea possible based on your justifications. Next, identify cultural or social issues that may have prevented Ijun from asking for help. Now this, you may want to draw on some research skills with Google, but just have a think about people from South Korea and any psychological challenges that may come up for them in regards to asking for help, or how their culture may impact how willing they are to actually ask for help. Practical activity 8. So Jason works at Bunnings as an assistant in the plant nursery. As part of his role, Jason is required to mix fertilizers, pesticides and poisons before applying them to plants in and grass around the nursery. Jason has been identified as having specific issues with numeracy. He has a great deal of trouble reading the graduations on the measuring containers, and so it is possible that he might cause damage to stock if he makes the mixtures too strong. Jason is undertaking study in horticulture and is hoping to be deemed competent in the unit prepare and apply chemicals, which include the performance criteria, mixing rates for chemicals it defined and calculated. As a trainer in Jason's workplace, what learning support strategies might you provide in order to help Jason continue his job at Bunnings? So we have a situation where he is really struggling with numbers, and he's struggling with liters, milliliters, and combining the chemicals properly. Obviously, this is something that really Jason needs to get right for his job, but also for the safety of customers at Bunnings. Okay. Now, probably Jason is going to need a lot of practice. He's probably going to need to watch some other people do it. He's probably potentially going to watch some videos. He may need to practice quite a bit and practice with other substances that could be safer. And just have a think about how would you break this task down so that Jason could handle it and slowly build up his skills. Okay, after conferring with an LLN advisor, describes the strategies you will use to determine whether or not Jason is competent in this particular unit of competency. So, after you've trained him, how would you know that he has picked up the skills that he needs? Okay. Next, explain how the process has changed your understanding of strategies required to support learners with LLN needs. So, based on what you've just created with Jason, what has it really made you realize? And extra considerations that may be required when you're assisting people, particularly with numeracy issues. Okay, practical activity 9. So read the emergency procedures provided, then complete the diagram on the following page. Such an ESL worker could easily understand them. Okay, so we have the ABC Training College's emergency evacuation procedures. Now, as you read through these, you will find that the procedures are quite convoluted, complicated, and could be quite challenging for an LLN challenged person. So, if we take a look at the first one, for example, on hearing an evacuation alarm or an instruction, or on instruction of emergency control personnel, immediately cease all activity and secure personal valuables. Now that could quite easily be summarized into if alarm rings, stop work, or stop all activities. Okay, so if we come down, we have these boxes here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 boxes. Your task is to find the 5 most important bits of information in here in order to get somebody outside the building and safely doing that. And so, for example, the first one that you put in here may be if alarm rings, stop work. Then think about what would the next step be in order to get somebody safely outside the building. Okay, so you're going to break down these instructions into 5 simple steps. Okay, so that somebody with English as a second language would be able to handle it quite easily. Next, identify alternative methods and or ways for adapting these instructions to suit an ESL worker. So you may think that these could be turned into pictures, they could be turned into even shorter words, they could be just stick-figure diagrams, whatever it might be. But have a think about 3 ways that the instructions themselves could be modified. Next, explain how this new procedure better enables workers to perform this task with increased proficiency. So once you've thought about how you would change it, how would that really benefit the workers? Okay. Now, practical activity 9C. Now go ahead and use the above modified resource and explain the instructions to a real vocational learner that may be studying in your workplace or within your simulated environment. You need to explain it in a way that the learner understands it and can repeat it back to you. Please imagine they have oral communication level 1 only. So it's essentially asking you, so that'll be, trainer name will be you, the person filling out this booklet. Student name will be the name of the person that you're doing the activity with. Title of the session is probably going to be emergency evacuation procedures. Date will be the date that you complete the task. But it's asking you to run through the steps with a LLN challenged learner who is a real vocational learner and somebody that is currently studying for work or for study purposes. And you simply need to run through those steps with them and put the location. Observed by is ideally going to be somebody with a diploma of TA. And feedback from the learner is simply going to be, how did they find the session, and were the instructions that you gave easy enough to understand? Okay, coming down. Practical activity 10. List 3 LLN resources currently available to you within your training organisation. Now these could be any extra support materials that you may have, translated documents, they could be simplified resources, they could be PowerPoints that have been simplified, they could be ESL tutors that are actually available if required. Okay, next one. Suggest one method you could use to apply the ACSF more effectively in your role as a trainer or assessor. So essentially it's asking, how could knowing this chart help you better support your LLN Challenge students? Okay, and probably your answer is going to be something similar to, if you can identify what level they are and you can identify the appropriate level of support, then that is going to speed up the process. It's also going to allow LLN Challenge students to feel more supported, and the strategies that you apply will probably be even more effective. Okay, so just want to elaborate on that and think about, in your industry specifically, how could you apply the ACSF? Coming down. Practical activity 11. Describe 2 processes you will use for evaluating your own training and assessment practice in relation to supporting LLN Challenge students. So how will you basically judge or know if your training assessment practice is working? Okay, so will you do pre and post testing? Will you do informal observation? Will you do LLN tests before and after? How will you evaluate if your training assessment practice is effective or not? Activity 12. In the space below, attach a PowerPoint slide in its original form from your workplace training environment. Then, in the next space provided, insert a redesigned version of the slide for a student that may have reading challenges. You may either turn the words into pictures or simplify the words, or however you choose to adjust it. Okay. So you're going to pick a PowerPoint that is exceptionally complicated. It could have words all over the place, way too many sentences, whatever it might be. And then attach it to your book. And then modify it and make it a lot simpler so that an LLN Challenge person could understand that slide. Okay, so we're looking for you to attach this, both of those slides. Okay, if you come down, practical activity 13. Now please go ahead and use the modified slide to teach one of your vocational learners the content from the slide. So again, trainer name will be you. Student name will be the student that you're teaching to. Training topic will be whatever the topic is related to the PowerPoints. Date is the date you're conducting a session. Location, where you're doing it. Predicted reading level based on ACSF. So you would be able to position them as a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 based on your judgment. Okay. Feedback from learner regarding how session went. Again, get your student to fill this section out based on how they felt during the session and if they understood everything they were told. Signature from candidate is you and observed by, ideally, a diploma qualified TA assessor. If you come down, practical activity 14. Identify one LLN specialist that may operate within your region or local area. Identify their name, contact details, and give a reason as to why you've chosen them as the most appropriate. So what I suggest for this is go to Google and type in Brisbane LLN specialist. or Melbourne, LLN specialist. Or if you go to LinkedIn, you'll often find LLN specialists with people with LLN specialists as their title. Otherwise, feel free to Google the local TAFE and see what LLN specialists they have available. Okay, so you'll need to put in their name, contact details, and why you think that they would be a good specialist to refer people to. Okay, question 15. What questions would you ask your learner to determine if your learning support was sufficient? So this could be things like, what are you still struggling with? It could be things like, how are you finding the level of support that you're receiving at the moment? Okay, so we're looking for about 3 questions that you might use to gauge if the support you're providing is sufficient. Okay, so aim for about 3 questions that you would ask. Okay, practical activity 16. What process could you go through to evaluate the success of your learning support and assessment strategies used within your organisation? So this is looking at a broader view, and it may be things like across the board LLN tests prior to enrolment. It could be across the board post-course LLN testing. You may come up with a number of different ideas, but ideally they're going to be specific to your workplace. Okay. Practical activity 17. Based on your personal reflection, which areas of LLN do you find the easiest to support? Place them in the order of easiest to hardest: learning, reading, writing, oral communication, numeracy. For myself personally, I would say that numeracy is the hardest for me to support, but I find learning actually one of the easiest to support. Everybody's going to have different answers on this, but for me, I'm going to order them, so easiest to hardest. So probably I'm going to put oral communication as easiest, next I'll put learning, next writing, next reading, and maybe last of all numeracy. Okay. Then, based on the above, what strategies or extra resources would you access to be able to better support people that may have deficiency in your lowest area of confidence? So for me, my lowest area of confidence was numeracy. So I might access online websites that could help someone out with their numeracy and make a list of those. If I had the lowest as reading, I might think of some other ways and other resources I might access. Okay, so the answers are going to vary significantly on activity 18. Activity 19. It has been identified that 2 of your students in your class are LLN challenged. One of them has difficulty with reading and writing. Another has difficulty with oral communication and following basic instructions. Both students are required to undertake assessment for the unit Conduct Manual Handling. Knowing the above scenarios, how will you endeavour to assess them and accommodate for their needs in each case? Okay. So if you had to assess somebody that needed to demonstrate abilities to conduct manual handling, and they had challenges with reading and writing, so in part A, we'd put student struggles with reading and writing. How would you adjust your assessment for that student? Okay. And next part is student 2. Well, student 2 has challenges with listening and challenges with speaking. So how would you adjust your assessment with that student? So probably if you're going to get them to do any simulated activities or practical tasks, you will probably need to adjust your verbal instructions. Okay, so in this section, think about how would you need to adjust your verbal instructions so that they could best understand it and comprehend what you want them to do. If somebody had reading and writing challenges, then you probably again need to adjust your assessment strategy and maybe look at alternative methods. So describe in there what those methods might be. Okay. Part B. Now share your assessment strategy with a colleague and ask for their feedback on how effective your adjusted strategies might be. make sure any pitfalls are identified and areas of enhancement. Okay, so essentially, you're going to share your answers here, part A, with a colleague and ask them, what do you think about these adjusted strategies? Would these be sufficient in order to help someone that had these challenges? Okay, so that is the end of the Language Literacy and Numeracy booklet. There will be another small project that you may be asked to do in class in relation to this Language Literacy and Numeracy unit. However, as you go through it, if you have any further questions at all, please don't hesitate to send us an email or give us a call at the office, and we are more than happy to walk you through it. And you will find that language literacy and numeracy, please keep in mind that there are no hard and fast right or wrong answers. There is only what you may believe as the best judgment or the best way to handle the case scenarios that are presented to you. So please don't overthink it. And at the same time, whatever you decide, make sure that you can justify it with an appropriate answer. Okay. So thanks so much for listening, and hope that this tutorial has made things a little bit more understandable for you. And as I said, if you've got any challenges at all, please give us a call. Thank you so much.